All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
So we're up to number 15. Hopefully 15 can be good because the news is all bad. One of my kids stayed home from school. I did not win the chili cook-off at work. I'm very disappointed.
Oh, rough week.
I know.
But
I spent $30 on chili.
But you're probably still doing better than Travis Kalanick this week.
Yeah, although he doesn't strike me as a person who's terribly self-aware. Maybe he thinks he's doing great all the time.
Yeah, could be.
They have
we'll come back to Travis a little later in the show.
Yeah, we have a couple of things to talk about beforehand, but it's a good time to just tee up, like, if you're ready for stories of corporate espionage.
Yeah,
buckle up. In the meantime, though, something far, far less exciting. Sam, we're going to talk about what we're driving, and I know what you're driving is the Camry Hybrid.
Yes. For those people who find the Lexus ES300h just a little bit too ostentatious for their tastes, Toyota also makes the Camry Hybrid, which is mechanically identical, but even, slightly less interesting.
It is a complete ball of fire. Actually, no, that'd be really bad.
Yeah. No, it's not a Samsung.
The thing about the Camry Hybrid that I've noticed, at least of the last couple that I've driven, is that it's the best driving Camry.
Yeah, actually, it's actually quite nice. We tease, because, Camrys have traditionally been somewhat derided in the automotive press as the rolling definition of beige. And in fact, the car I'm driving is in fact beige. But it's actually not a bad car to drive, just as with the ES, that you had last week or the week before. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's not exciting, but it does fine.
Yeah, well, it's not meant to be exciting. It's meant to do everything and just stay the hell out of the way. And it's brilliant at that.
Yeah, it's roomy. It's got plenty of room for a family. Room for three in the back seat. Decent trunk space. The one thing that you do give up when you go with the hybrid is because the battery is, or at least part of the battery is up against the back of the rear seat. You don't get to fold down the rear seat, so there's no pass through. So if you have long objects to carry, you're going to be pretty much out of luck. You're restricted to whatever will fit into the space in the trunk behind the battery. But other than that, you're not really giving anything up relative to any other Camry.
Only your distinct sense of individuality and
well, if you're driving a Camry, you're not really expressing any individuality anyway. It's just a car that's going to be very reliable. It's going to get you where you need to go, do it very efficiently. This thing's getting about 34, 35 miles per gallon. It's going to do what you need it to do when you need to do it.
That's kind of what I found about the hybrid, the ES anyway, was like, no matter what I did, I got 32 to 35 miles per gallon. Like, I could leave it idling in the driveway for a couple of hours and still it would just, no matter what I did, I could not get it under 30 miles per gallon.
Well, you just weren't trying hard enough.
Well, yes, I'm sure that I could have been a little bit more determined. But it's a good all around car. And that's from where we've come, or from, where we've been with hybrids not too long ago. I guess almost 20 years ago now, a little more than 20 years ago.
Actually, this year marks the 20th anniversary of the launch of the original Prius in Japan. Yeah.
So from that, we get a car that's just pretty much normal. That's hard to do. And
the thing about, hybrids today, it used to be, some of the earlier hybrids, When they did their engine shut off, you could feel it shutting off. You'd feel a shudder when the engine shut down and when it restarted. And modern hybrids like the Camry and most other modern hybrids for that matter, it's a completely seamless drive. Unless you're looking down at the gauge, that tells you, what the current driving mode is. You're never really going to notice whether you're running on electricity alone or blended power or all engine. It's just it all just blends together.
So which model do you have? Do you have the LE, the SE, or the XLE?
It's the SE.
So that's interesting because that's kind of like the sporty Camry, right? It's the SE. So they've made a sporty-ish hybrid.
Yeah, it's got a little lip spoiler along the trailing edge of the trunk lid. It's got some nice looking wheels on it. So it's actually the current generation Camry is actually, especially since they did the refresh, the mid-cycle refresh a couple of years ago, is actually not a bad looking car. It's surprisingly stylish, in fact.
Well, yeah, I mean, it gets knocked. I think part of the reason why it gets knocked is just because there's so many of them. I remember being a kid, those late Colonnade Cutlass Supremes, which sold like an ungodly amount per year, were just everywhere. So they became part of the scenery. They blended in. That's what happens with the Camry too. But when you look at it, and it has been for as long as as long as I've been writing about cars, the Camry has had a rather expressive design. It hasn't been groundbreaking, but it hasn't been ugly or boring either. It's good to look at.
I mean, the last couple generations of Camry are actually pretty decent in term, from a design perspective. I guess I'm not thrilled about the direction that Toyota has gone in general with their big grille look, their big trapezoidal grille.
Yeah.
And that's something that applies to all of the current generation of Toyotas. But aside from that, there's not a whole lot else to complain about with the design.
Yeah, well, and the one thing that really bugs me about a lot of hybrids is how mushy they are. And the SE with its sport suspension is probably a little better.
It feels fairly pinned down. It doesn't feel mushy. It doesn't have the leaden feel of earlier Priuses. So it's reasonably lively. You're not going to mistake this for, say, a Ford Fusion Sport, or even a Mazda 6, any Mazda 6. But it is what it is.
Or even a Fusion Energy or something. I guess that's the question I get for myself is like, I step outside the Camry and I'm like, could I own this? Could I make this as like a conscious choice? How do you feel about that? Do you think you could deal with that?
No.
All right.
Well, and it's not because it's a Camry.
Right.
It's more for me, for cars. I think generally I prefer to have a hatchback or a station wagon in a car. So I tend to shy away from sedans anyway. And if I'm going to go with something that isn't a hatchback or a wagon, then I'm going to go probably for a coupe of some kind. So, it's just, the it's not just the Camry, but any midsize sedan, is not going to be what I'm going to be inclined to buy.
That's fair. I mean, what am I going to say? You're spending the money. You make the decision for yourself.
That's right. It is my money.
Yeah.
So, and since there aren't really any more station wagons available to buy in the American market because nobody else wants them besides me, apparently, that leaves me with hatchbacks.
Yeah, well, that leaves me with the car I'm driving this week. Unless you have more to say about the Camry, we can move on let's move on about that hardware. So I had the Honda Civic Sport. Let's see, let me get it right. Honda Civic Hatchback
Sport.
Yes, in Sonic Gray, which looks great. I really don't have anything bad to say about this car, partially because it wasn't loaded up with all of the typical Honda tech. So I hate their button free, like, or single knob touchscreen thing that they have in a lot of their cars now, or all of their cars. This had like the base model radio, so it had no nav. It's great. It's fantastic. It's easy to use. There's no bright ass screen and no stuff that's like hard to find buried in menus. No, I like the Civic Hatch a lot. In the Sport, you could argue the Sport is a little bit overdone with the way it's styled. I thought it looked great. I might get tired of it after a little while, but you know, you only go through life once. There are times.
The manual or a CVT?
I had the manual. Yeah. So that's the other thing too. It completely made me change my mind about that small turbo engine. The last time I had the 1.5 liter, it was hooked up with the CVT, and I didn't really like that combo. This engine with the manual, it doesn't feel like it's turbocharged. It's very linear. And it's very well matched, and I like it quite a bit. And it's very flexible and has plenty of power. The one real criticism I can kind of make is and this is a lot of cars with manual transmissions now, because of the electronic throttles and the way they're programmed for emissions controls. It's very difficult in some cars to drive the manual smoothly because it's doing something for you. And like it's adjusting the throttle, and I did find that like the clutch take up point was a little bit hard to discern. But I can't, that's about it. That's about all I can criticize from the Civic. It's overall it's really good, and it made me miss the CRX, but only a little bit, because this is sort of some of that CRX attitude with the benefit of a back seat and 4 doors and all of the modernity that comes with it. If I wanted, you know
what's one of the interesting features about the Civic hatchback that I've never seen in any other car is, most compact hatchbacks, you usually get a cargo cover in the back, that goes when you open up the tailgate. It's usually hanging off the tailgate, and it lifts up with the tailgate. In the Civic hatchback, it doesn't, the cargo cover doesn't go up. And in fact, instead of being hinged right behind the seats, it stays in place. But when you release it, it actually retracts across from left to right and basically retracts into the side of the cargo bay, which is actually really cool, because for those times, sometimes, one of the reasons why I like to have hatchbacks or wagons is to have that extra utility when I need to carry large stuff, bringing stuff home from the big box store or from the farmer's market or whatever it might be.
Or those like 3 boxes of paper that you took home from the office, or was that just me?
I think that was just you, since I work in a home office.
Sometimes you got to print out some school papers.
Hey, whatever. But when you need to carry large stuff, and then you got to pull out that cargo cover, and you got to stash it somewhere. Right. And there's nowhere to stash it in the car. Well, the Civic designers thought of that. So you just unhook it from the left, and it just retracts back across into the right side of the car, or the right side of the cargo bay.
That's evidence of Honda being a Honda, that they've always done that. They've always kind of looked
attention to detail.
Yeah. And they've said, maybe there's a better way. And they're bringing, I think, a little bit more of that back to the market than they had over the last few years. The new Ridgeline is certainly completely full of that Honda think, in a good way. And that's, those little details, they look weird at first, or like, well, why'd they do it like that? Everybody else does it another way. And then you use the thing and you go, well, of course it's that way because it's better.
That's right.
And, but I really liked the Civic hatch to the point where, I talked on Twitter with Chris Pockert about this a little bit. We had a little bit of back and forth where he was saying, I like the Civic hatch, the Civic Sport hatch, but how does it stack up against, say, the Mazda 3? And I'm not really sure now. I judged my experience previously off the sedan, and I would definitely pick a Mazda 3 over a Civic sedan, especially with the CVT. The Sport hatch is a different thing. There's certainly different flavors, but It drives really well. It's not quite as quiet as I'd like, but I'm old and I like luxury, and the Mazda's not going to be quite as quiet either. The shifter feels good. All the controls are good. It's lively. It's handles really well. So all of the things that we expect out of a Honda, if you've ever spent any time in an older, the Prelude back in the day and stuff, it'll remind you of that as well, in the best of ways. So I'm really fond of this car.
I am too. So I'm buying one next week.
I was just saying, to the point where you actually spent your money. So this is one
but not a sport. We're not getting a sport though.
How different is it when it's not the sport?
Well, the sport basically is it's essentially the base LX trim level, but with larger 18-inch wheels and some of the lower body extensions. So you get the front splitter and the sill extensions, and that's basically it. That distinguishes the sport from the LX. So you get the basic radio, no sunroof, things like that. Yep. So the one we're going to get is an EX model, which is the next trim level up. So the Sport is only available on the hatchback. You can't get it on the sedan. The EX is the next trim level up. So you get things like heated seats and the a sunroof, and we're getting it with the Honda Sensing package, which is the driver assist package. So you get lane keeping and adaptive cruise control on there.
Nice. And that's, look, what does that ring up? I'm trying to figure out, because this is the thing with Honda. When they send out a press car, they'll send the sticker, but it won't ever have any price on it.
Right. So
TBD.
The Sport is actually, the Sport with the manual transmission is actually surprisingly inexpensive. It's only I think it's 21 and change. And then the one we're going to get, which is the EX with the Honda Sensing and also the CVT, is about 24.5. That's
so. I guess I've got to recalibrate my thinking too. I feel like these cars start to get pricey when they push past 22, but it's not uncommon. You could get a car in this class up to 30.
Oh yeah, easily. I mean, if you get the the Civic Hatchback Sport Touring, which is the top trim level on the hatchback, it's over 29,000.
Yeah,
and when you start looking at some of the hot hatch variants, for example, if you just the hotter variants of these, for example the Civic Si. Which is only going to be available as coupe when it launches later this year. It's probably going to be in the $33,000 range, I would think. The Type R, is probably going to be in the mid to upper 30s. Probably close to 40. Just like Focus RS, is like $37,000.
I just it's so tough for.
It's mind boggling, isn't it, to think of. What used to be an economy car, costing, nearly $40,000.
Well, that, and I mean, for those variants too, like the SI and the R, you can get a lot of GTI for under 30, mm-hmm. And that's a really hard car to beat. It's easier to be different, I guess. But if you're going to compete against something like that polished, I don't know. I'm not sure. And I'm sure they're not looking to set the world on fire in terms of sales figures with the SI or the R either. But I'm not even sure that I have interest in those cars at that price level. I mean, they just seem to be pricing themselves out of where I would want to be. But I'm getting old.
And they don't expect to sell that many of those. Yeah. Like the Type R. I would be surprised if they sell more than 3,000 or 4,000 of those, if even that many in the U.S. In fact, that I think maybe it might be global sales might be around 5,000. So it's probably only a couple thousand in the U.S. Same thing with the Focus RS or Golf, the Golf R. Those are all in the 5,000 to 6,000 units a year range that they sell.
Well. It's an interesting segment. I really like the smaller cars, and I'm seeing now. I looked it up on the website too, so it's like 21.3. That's a really good deal for
it's a bargain. I mean, I mean, it's not cheap, but I mean, compared to the rest of the market, it's pretty hard these days to find any new car for much less than $20,000, at least sticker price. And you can actually get, a lot of incentives on a lot of the compact cars and smaller cars. Because, with a few exceptions, most particularly the Civic, most of the other small cars are not selling that well. So you can actually get some pretty healthy discounts on a lot of them. And you can get them down around 15 grand in a lot of cases. But the Civic is the one exception, to everybody running away from cars into SUVs. In fact, Civic sales were up, I think, something like 15% in 2016. And it was actually Honda's best-selling nameplate in 2016.
That's impressive, especially given that they've rolled out a lot, the HRV, which is, to me, that's the perfect size crossover in that brand too, which should carry a lot more weight. But
yeah, well, they've been capacity constrained on the HRV. So I think they sold about 70,000 or so last year. This year, I think the new CRV will probably be Honda's top seller, because they just started production of that late in 2016. And so this year, it'll have a full year of sales, and it'll probably overtake the Civic this year. But Civic's still doing well.
Well, it seems like a good problem to have for an automaker, to be selling everything you can make.
Yeah, well, and especially for Honda, Honda is kind of an interesting case when you look at their business practices. Most other automakers, for their lower end vehicles, they dump tens of thousands of them into daily rental fleets. Honda does not sell cars to daily rental fleets. I mean, if you ever go to rent a car at the airport, you will almost practically never find a Honda in a rental fleet. They focus virtually all of their effort on retail sales. So almost 100% of Honda's sales are to retail customers.
Well, that's the way it should be. Rental fleets are, if you're using it to prop up your sales numbers, that's silly. And then you're creating negative resale value there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're flooding the market, and those cars are going to rotate out of the fleets in 18,000 miles. So it seems like you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, well, and that's what's something that's kind of getting away from Honda for a moment. Something that GM's been doing over the past year that's kind of interesting, to avoid selling excess volumes into rental fleets is, they've been taking, and also to keep up their residual values on their used cars, is in order to keep from flooding the market with off lease used cars. They've actually been taking those, and I don't know if you've heard about the Lyft Express Drive program that they have in a number of cities, where they offer discounted leases to Lyft drivers in a bunch of cities with nearly new cars. And what they're actually doing is they're taking off lease cars that, instead of sending them to auction, and flooding the market with those cars, they're taking those cars and offering them to Lyft drivers to drive at discounted rates. And what that does is it makes newer cars available to Lyft drivers that are, to make them more attractive to riders. And it also gives passengers of these vehicles an opportunity to experience these vehicles, to ride in these vehicles firsthand, which is kind of an interesting marketing strategy. So expose people to these vehicles without necessarily going for a test drive or buying one. And hopefully, getting some of these Lyft customers to come in, when they go to shop for a car, and say, "Hey, I really like that Equinox or that Cruze that I rode in last week. Let's go check one out and take one for a test drive."
Well, that was part of the thinking behind the automakers buying into the rental companies back in the day too. Hertz and National, or all those too.
Right, but they were flooding those fleets with brand new cars.
Right, and
what GM is doing is they're actually taking used cars and making them available through Lyft.
Yeah, and maybe that was just sort of their way of explaining it was, oh no, it's a marketing thing. We're putting the cars in there so people can experience them. It's an interesting way to double dip too. Where you're sort of, instead of, like you said, instead of flooding the used market with cars and driving down the value of every single model and overall your brand cachet, you're getting another bite at the apple, really. The car goes for a useful life and it serves that purpose. That's genius. All right. Do we want to move on to some topics?
Absolutely.
All right. Which do we have a couple. So which do we want to cover first? Do we want to talk about the Uber Waymo thing? Because we teed that up, so we might as well.
Yeah, sure. Right. Why don't we start off with that one? So
Uber are terrible, terrible, terrible people. Never take an Uber ever. I have never taken an Uber. I vow to never take one.
Mr. Kalanick, that was Dan Roth that said that.
You're awful. You're horrible. You should be ashamed of yourself.
I mean, I don't like Uber as a company either.
Yeah.
I support the premise of what companies like Uber and Lyft are doing because, frankly, the taxi industry is pretty bad. They're pretty horrible as well.
Well, see, that's the thing is like their technology and the team that they built. That was another story about Uber this week, but just in general, their product is good, but they as people are bad and they should feel bad.
Yeah. I mean, the company has a terrible corporate culture. There's all kinds of issues there, some of which we've talked about before, but the news that we get, we're recording this on Thursday night and just a couple of hours ago, Waymo published a post on Medium announcing that they are suing Uber for Uber and their subsidiary Otto for basically theft of intellectual property and misappropriation of intellectual property. And Otto is a company that started up early in 2016 that was founded by 4 former Google employees, 3 of whom worked on the Google self-driving car program, which is now Waymo. And the 4th person came from the Google mapping division. And they started up Otto, which their focus was on developing autonomous trucks, long haul trucks,
which they could test without permits as well.
Permits?
Why? Why would we want to follow the rules? We're just
who said they decided they could test without permits. I think there's some state regulators that would disagree with their assessment of that. But Otto was purchased a few months after they launched. Otto was purchased by Uber, and turns out that one of the people that one of the co-founders at Otto, Anthony Lewandowski, is now being accused of having stolen all kinds of data and drawings and other intellectual property from Google / Waymo before he left the company. And according to the lawsuit, according to the complaint from Waymo, about 6 weeks before he left, he downloaded about 9.7 gigabytes of material onto his company issued laptop and then copied that to an external hard drive before reformatting the laptop. And he brought that with him to Otto. And the key element of the material that he allegedly stole, I have to remember to use that word because nothing's been proven in court yet.
Yes, but the evidence so far is pretty damning. Well, of course, we've also only gotten
Waymo's side of the story.
We've got Waymo's side of the story via Medium. So
right, but I took a skim through the actual complaint that they filed in court as well. But essentially, what they're saying is that one of the key elements of Waymo's technology, and this is something that they announced last month at the Detroit Auto Show, is that they've developed their own sensors, including their own LiDAR sensors in-house, and they're going to be manufacturing those So they've developed their own sensor technology that they've dramatically reduced the cost of this technology compared to where it was when Google started down the developing self-driving car technology back in 2009. And they've slashed the cost of it by about 90%. And evidently, what Waymo is claiming is that they accidentally got copied on an email from one of their suppliers that was supposed to be a communication between them and Uber that had some of this material in there, some drawings of the circuit board, and they took a look at this and realized that, wait a minute, this is our circuit board design.
Right. So,
and that's what tipped them off to what was going on.
And we should pause and get a little geeky and just say, like, while to most people, a circuit board's a circuit board's a circuit board, they all look the same. That is not the case. They are specific technology, and often they are laid out in a particular way through exhaustive testing and R&D, so that the signal flows through the board the way it needs to be, resistant to radio interference and all of those things. Like, nothing on a circuit board ends up there randomly.
Right. Well, and especially for something like this, I mean, this is part of the LiDAR sensor, the laser sensor. So they're doing all the signal conditioning of, the LiDAR, sends out these laser beams and reflects back, and so they're measuring the time of flight. So how long does it take each pulse of light to reflect back from an object? That tells you how far away you are from that object, and helps you determine the shape and the velocity and direction of that object. So all of this stuff, is a lot of this is being done, on the signal conditioning is being done on the circuit board. So you're right, it's very specific in the design, and it sounds like, at least according to Waymo, that they basically took it, unchanged. They basically changed virtually nothing on this when they took it. At least that's the allegation. We'll see when it all comes to court. But what's interesting about this is, over the years, Google has been on the receiving end of a lot of patent lawsuits and intellectual property lawsuits from a bunch of other companies, but they're not a company that generally goes after other companies. They've generally had a more open attitude towards intellectual property.
Well, yeah, they have until money is at stake. This is the bitch of the thing with Google is, when their bottom line is at stake, then the fangs come out. But when it's everybody else, they don't give a crap.
Right. But I mean, that's what I'm getting at, though. I mean, they're generally not one that tends to use intellectual property law, to defend themselves. For the most part, they usually keep moving along with their own technology and just doing their thing. I mean, certainly they've been accused of misappropriating technology from other companies, but they usually aren't the ones that are going after others. And in this case, for them to come out so publicly, going after Uber is kind of unusual for them. And so it's going to be very interesting to watch this over the coming weeks and months. Certainly it wouldn't surprise me, given some of the other things that, Uber's general attitude, if they either, when they bought if they didn't do their due diligence, or they simply decided to ignore things that they found, so if they're, if they knew what was going on and just dismissed it, that could put them in a very bad position. Well,
the former Waymo employee who left too said basically, like, I'm going to recreate this somewhere else.
Well, at least that's what's being alleged in the suit.
Right. He allegedly said, damn it, this is hard.
Well, I mean, we don't want to defame anybody. And so, like I said, so far none of this has been proven in court.
Sure.
So we'll have to wait and see how it plays out over the next few months. But if Waymo does prevail, it's going to be very problematic for Uber.
Yeah, but they're worth so much on paper.
Yeah, on paper.
If they have to liquidate, Well, that's the other thing too. Is everybody thinks of Uber is like a super valuable company. They're not making a profit.
No, in fact, they reportedly lost about $3 billion last year.
Yeah, with an app that, first of all, their valuation is ludicrous.
Yes,
their product is an app that summons cars.
Yep.
Like, you should be able to do that profitably for less than $1 billion from scratch.
Which is exactly what a lot of other companies are in the process of developing.
Yeah. So the fact that they lost $3 billion and their valuation is some ridiculous, it's tens of billions, right?
It's about $65 billion.
That's idiotic.
Yes.
Not that I'm a market analyst, but that company does not in any way have anything that's going to return that kind of value.
Well, and the key thing is that there's nothing that Uber has built, at least in terms of their ride hailing platform, that can't easily be replicated by any other company. It's
That's
just
true.
it's not, the technology is not that hard to build.
No, the only
which is why a lot of other companies are doing it.
Yeah, and the only thing they have right now is first mover advantage, and that's quickly going away as they continue to just be bad people and get themselves distracted. And automakers are already investing in competitors or developing their own very similar solutions. The upside for an automaker is that they have access to all of the sensors in the vehicle without any kind of reverse engineering or difficulty.
Right.
They can design this stuff in from the get-go. They can make it part of the apps that they already offer in some way. There's a lot of other ways that Uber's going to sort of get its ass handed to it if they're not careful. So.
Right. Uber's been losing billions of dollars a year, in part because they've been offering cut rate fares, and they pay out most of what comes in to the drivers. And one of the reasons why they want to shift to autonomous vehicles is so they don't have to pay the drivers. But the problem is, if they have to start buying or building vehicles, it's not clear that they're actually going to be able to get profitable doing that either.
Yeah. Well, the autonomous vehicle thing brings up the whole other point. Like, I feel like we're at that cusp where there needs to be some sort of federal rulemaking happening or underway for autonomous vehicles to be sharing the road with the rest of the standard cars at this point.
Don't hold your breath on that.
No, I'm not. I don't see it happening, but and I've seen calls for this at a certain point too, like over the last couple of weeks, like, hey, it's starting to get real messy out there and real uncertain, and we're going to need some guidelines. The industry actually would probably welcome it versus limbo or nothing, like the regulations need to start keeping pace. And so that's going to be a larger and larger stumbling block for all of this stuff as it continues to go. Because the companies that are developing it want to move cautiously. They don't want to have to undo things after they release a product, but it's so uncertain. They also don't want to be waiting for legislation that takes 2 years to happen when they've got a product ready to go. So,
right. Well, the problem we've got right now is that, the technology is still very nascent. And so, you don't want to create regulations that are going to potentially stymie the development of the technology. So whatever you do, it has to be technology agnostic. And I think one way to do that would be to focus on, any regulations that you would develop should probably be in the form of, setting some standards, some performance standards for particularly for the sensor technology. So the sensors should be able to detect certain types of things in certain types of conditions. And that should be the baseline. As far as how they interact with human-driven vehicles, I'm not sure how you're actually going to be able to regulate that. One thing that I think it is good, from the guidelines that NHTSA put out last year, is that they want companies that are developing this technology to log data and make it available to regulators in order to study it, and understand how these vehicles are working, and eventually, that can be used, perhaps to develop some new regulations. But I think you have to be careful about how you do those regulations right now. You don't want to rush into it too much.
No, I completely agree. And I think that there's a couple of things that are going to happen here. And one of the pieces you actually wrote was this week for Forbes, the new version of Cadillac Q with it's starting to put vehicle to vehicle communications capability into the cars, and other automakers are going to start doing this as well. It's going to propagate across the GM line eventually. It not really for anything super functional yet. I see this as GM making a move to get it out there, to be able to take advantage of whatever they can do, or just be ready. Like it kind of doesn't hurt them to have it out there at this point. And if one of the moves to make sharing the roads with automated vehicles easier is by vehicle to vehicle communication, which is probably a very good thing to be looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, V2V communication is something that's something that should be a part of every automated vehicle. It's for the fundamental control of the vehicle, it should be able to do it without communicating with other vehicles. Every vehicle should be able to communicate, or should be able to, navigate through the world on its own using its sensors. But the V2V adds this extra layer of situational awareness to the vehicles. And, by communicating with each other, the vehicles can also signal intent to each other, so that you're not, you can get some proactive information, before the sensors can pick up stuff. You can get information that is transmitted between the vehicles.
And one of the other components of this is we just need more data. Another thing we saw this week was BMW and Mobileye are rolling out better mapping or map data collection as well.
Yeah. So, one of the things that Mobileye is a company that currently makes most of the vision systems that are used for lane keeping systems in the market today. So they supply many of the OEMs, not all of them. There's a few that are using other products. Subaru, for example, uses a Hitachi system with dual cameras for their eyesight system. Mercedes-Benz is using an auto-leave dual camera system. But Mobileye supplies most of the single camera systems that are on the market today. And one of the things that they announced last year was something called the Road Experience Management System. And we talked a little bit about this, I think, back in November after I went to a Delphi event in Pittsburgh.
We had an interview too. If we dig that back up,
yeah. And so what REM is, and we're not talking about the band here, is they've got a mechanism that uses taking the images that the camera is recording. You have a database in the car of stationary objects, that are in the world around you. So this is another layer on top of, you got, for navigation, you've got your basic map layer of here's where all the roads are. And then you've got another layer on top of that that's part of building up, high definition maps for automated driving that includes, the objects in the world around the road, and also real-time information about, things that can be dynamic, things like construction zones. And that database resides in the car. The REM system, as it's taking its pictures as the car drives down the road, it's comparing what the objects it detects in those images against that database. And when it sees something that's different, then it takes the location of that object and transmits it up to Mobileye's servers. And then it gets aggregated with information from other vehicles. They validate it, and then it gets put together and sent back out to the vehicle fleet. So you can get updated navigational data in real time. And because it's only looking at the changes from what's already in the vehicle, it's not transmitting every single thing that it sees, but only the things that it sees that aren't already in the database. So it doesn't, it's not going to flood the system with too much data. And so they announced that, and now a couple of weeks ago, Volkswagen announced that they're going to be incorporating this into their upcoming vehicles starting in 2018. And this is all based on using Mobileye's next generation chip, which is, they call it IQ4. The stuff that's in vehicles today is IQ3. The IQ4 chip is coming to market in 2018. Volkswagen is going to be using it on some of their vehicles next year, collecting REM data. And the deal announced this week with BMW is they're taking that data from the IQ4 chips, and they're actually going to be incorporating it into high definition maps from HERE, which is the company that was bought last year from Nokia by a consortium consisting of BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Volkswagen. And Volkswagen hasn't said yet whether they're going to be using the REM data for HERE maps, because they do use HERE maps in their cars, but they will probably be doing that. They'll probably make that announcement at some point. They're still in discussions according to what I've been told by my contacts at HERE. But I would expect that probably in the not too distant future, we'll also hear a similar announcement from Mercedes-Benz as well, and perhaps from other automakers.
Well, and this is on top of the stuff that this announcement this week is on top of when they announced it with CES that there'd be autonomous 7 Series cars and working with Mobileye and Intel and BMW together, and so they're making a lot of moves, and they're doing a lot of I guess data collection at this point. But it's more than just having the cars out there getting the data. They've got to figure out how to transmit this data back and forth, and again, like you said, it's even if it's only doing incremental stuff, like how do you get that over a mobile wireless network and stuff? So they're
and that's Mobileye understands that, and that's why they've designed the system to keep the bandwidth requirements to a minimum. So I think it's about 10 or it's either 10 or 100 kilobytes per kilometer.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not a lot of data.
I think it's 10 kb per kilometer. So yeah,
10 kilobytes per kilometer, which is, that's 10 kilobytes is almost nothing. These days. So, and when I talked to Mobileye folks last fall, they said that, a high definition map of the entire United States would be about 62 gigabytes. Which is, that's a lot of data, but that's how much would be stored on the vehicle. I
could pull 62 gigabytes off my 4G in minutes.
Yes.
It wouldn't take very long.
Yeah.
So that's impressive, actually. Like that, and not only the fact that they've gotten the map that's kind of small, honestly, in my mind. But also the fact that we have networks robust enough to just move that kind of data without thinking. And
it's going to get better, in the coming years. By the end of the decade, we're going to start seeing rollout of 5G networks. They're starting to test some of those technologies this year, and we'll see those rolling out by the end of the decade, and that'll help. Have more efficient use of data or more efficient use of wireless spectrum. And then, the other thing that we're starting to see now is, by the mid 2020s, every car is going to have a cellular telematics system built into it. Almost every car.
Yes. How else are they going to spy on us, Sam?
Well, there is that too. Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind is that Mobileye is not the only company doing this sort of thing. Collecting data from vehicle sensors, aggregating it, and then spreading it back out to the fleet. There's other companies like Civil Maps, which is a company that Ford invested in last year, that's doing something very similar. Their Civil Maps is actually getting data from more than just the camera sensors. They're also using LiDAR and radar and whatever other sensors are available to collect data. But you'll see some other companies doing the same sort of thing in the next couple of years as well.
Yes, because they want to put it all in the thing and make it part of X key score or whatever that thing is. And
Yeah, we will have no privacy.
We don't. I was reading about Palantir, which this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's a Peter Thiel venture, and he invested in it pretty heavily. They are tied up very deeply with the intelligence community, and holy crap.
Yeah, if you want to be scared, just read about some of the stuff that Thiel's invested in. Well, I mean, there's all kinds of things. You know, it'll just make you paranoid.
It's just, it's really just not helping my desire to just want to completely unplug and go. Yeah. I want breaker points and low compression so I can run my tractor on nothing, you know, like I just, Okay. Moving on. This is an interesting little thought experiment that I admittedly haven't dug into the numbers for, but I wanted to actually run this by you. It's kind of picking up on an idea that was tweeted by Dave Sullivan, who I think he's Auto Pacific, I think. But he's an analyst and he works from home from Michigan, like all you guys apparently do. But so the Opel division is up for sale. The Popeyes chicken has just been sold. So I think Popeyes was sold for about 1.8 billion. Opel is on the block for about 2 billion. I'm pretty sure the restaurant's a better deal.
And Uber's worth 65.
Huh?
And Uber is worth 65.
Yes. Which, again, both the restaurant and the crappy chicken joint make something of value. I mean,
don't speak ill of Popeyes. Popeyes makes great chicken.
Okay. All right. It's funny.
Especially the spicy.
All right. Okay. I'm sorry. I'll back away from that. I'll backpedal a little bit, but Opel definitely makes something of value. Popeyes, they make food, and Uber makes an app that doesn't make anything else. So that sort of shade throwing done. I honestly do think though, like if you've got 2 billion sitting around, the restaurant is a much better deal than an automaker, which seems counterintuitive when you think about it, because like you figure, cars, like it's a very prestigious thing to make, right? Like that's super, technologically advanced, and people spend tens of thousands of dollars on them. And, that's the real deal, man. Like fried chicken is fried chicken.
Okay.
It's
but there's far more ego involved with building cars.
Yeah. Well, and so my reasoning is too, like, being in the restaurant business is it's more nimble. Its margins, they're probably not great. But the car business,
neither's the car business.
I was gonna say the car business has terrible margins, especially on the kind of cars that Opel makes. And you would think yes, you're going to have to invest capital to set up a chain of chicken restaurants. So that's the thing too. Like when you're buying it, you're not starting from the ground up with either of these. So you're actually getting a deal with either of them. I think you're probably getting for 2 billion with Opel. Like you're getting a lot more stuff you can strip and flip if you're some kind of capital management company.
Well, except that it's PSA that's trying to buy Opel from GM.
Right. So if you're PSA too, like you're looking at like, well, where are the redundancies? What can we sell off? They're not going to just necessarily just throw stuff away. So, where are they going to streamline the business and what can they get rid of to recoup some of that, sunk cost? There's more stuff of value when you buy the automaker versus like buying the restaurant chain. I get that, but I think that your path to profitability is much, much faster when you're selling food. And so it's just an interesting kind of thought. And they probably both spend maybe the same amount on advertising, or they both spend a bunch. They have to move more chicken nuggets per $1,000 spent in media than Opel sells cars for the same kind of dollars. So that's my take on it. I don't know. I should back it up with numbers, but does that make sense, or am I just off in crazy land again? Those are two different questions. I realize
they're not mutually exclusive.
Correct.
To be honest, I'm not really sure. I guess I'm still not entirely sure why PSA actually wants Opel.
So do you think PSA wants it to just get rid of competition?
I don't know. I mean, why would you spend a couple of $1 billion to buy the car, to buy the company to get rid of the brand? I don't know. Because the thing is, it's not like, Volkswagen Group bought up a lot of other brands over the last 20, 30 years, there was some overlap with some of their existing brands, but they bought up brands like Bugatti and Lamborghini and Bentley, which were obviously extending their reach into very different areas where Volkswagen and Audi weren't already competing. But Opel, is kind of already overlapping with both the Peugeot and Citroën brands. And so I'm not really sure what's in it for PSA, other than just to expand their total volumes. Certainly there's going to be some cost savings, from eliminating redundancies in engineering and manufacturing, but I don't know. I think the deal makes a lot more sense for GM than it does for PSA, I think.
Well, what does PSA stand to gain from buying? Like, how is GM going to lock down their IP as well? Because, when you're building a car, especially in a competing sector, it's all platform engineering at this point. So we saw this with like the sale of Saab. That was Epsilon. And they continued. I think they're still making Epsilon cars.
They're making newer generations of it. They're quite different. They've been revamped a lot since the last Saabs that were built. What's typical of this type of deal is that when you sell the company like that, PSA will be allowed to continue manufacturing the current stuff, and they'll get some engineering expertise out of that, but then there's not much more than what they could get by just buying and reverse engineering the car anyway. So what'll probably happen is as the next generation of the various Opel models come up to be revamped, they'll probably get put on common platforms with PSA vehicles. And in some cases, the next generation PSA vehicles might use some of the Opel technology. But it's more likely that, it'll go the other way around, because, GM will probably limit, part of the deal would probably be limiting PSA's use of that for anything other than Opel and Vauxhall vehicles.
Yeah, I guess I have kind of the same question. Like, what's in it for PSA to own Opel?
Opel's been pretty steadily losing money for a better part of the last 20 years, which is why GM wants to get out of Opel.
Oh, they used to make money?
Yeah, actually they did. They were actually doing pretty good for a while in the 80s and the early 90s. And it wasn't until the latter half of the 90s that they started losing money consistently. They almost sold Opel in 2009 during the bankruptcy reorganization. They had a deal to sell it to Magna and a Russian bank. Oh,
that's right. Magna wanted to get in the car business in the worst way. They wanted to become a manufacturer.
Yeah. So they had a deal with Sparebank and Magna to sell Opel, and GM backed out of the deal after about 6 months into the negotiations. They walked away from the deal and decided to keep Opel instead. And they've used Opel for a lot of their small and mid-sized car engineering over the last decade. but a lot of that that work has now been transferred over. A lot of the midsize car stuff is now being led out of Detroit, out of Warren, and the small car engineering is primarily being led out of South Korea.
Yeah.
So they don't really need Opel's expertise anymore. Yeah,
we talked about that a little bit last week. They certainly have. I mean, their Daewoo investments paid off. PSA's CEO Carlos Tavares has indicated too they may want to sell Opel outside the European market if they pick up the brand. So maybe that's it. Like, yeah, we'll take a hit to buy Opel, but we will be able to sell our cars, so we'll get greater volume in different markets. I'm not sure why they would want to try launching it in other markets and expect that that's going to pay off as well. I don't know. These guys they got little plans that.
I'm sure he's got some kind of plan. I just don't know what it is at this point.
Yeah. We'll keep an eye on that. Did we want to hit? Before we do anything else, we should get to questions. But we had you did an interview with Alan Dona that will dovetail nicely with one of our questions.
Yeah, so while I was in Chicago for the auto show, I sat down with Alan Dona, who's electric powertrain systems manager at Ford. Ford was showing off one of their Transit Connect hybrid prototypes in Chicago, and so let's run that interview now, where I talked to Alan about that and what they're doing with hybrids going forward, and then we'll be right back.
All right.
So, Alan Dona, you are manager of electric propulsion for Ford?
Calibration of the electrified powertrain.
Okay, great. So let's talk the Transit Connect Hybrid, which is a new program that Ford has just launched. Are they all in the city of New York?
No, we're going to have 20 vehicles, 10 of them taxis, 10 of them taxis, 10 of them as delivery vans. They will be in several large cities across the U.S. The only city we've announced so far is New York.
Okay.
It's 10 vans and 10 taxis.
Okay. Cargo vans. So first off, the powertrain that's in these vehicles, what is it? Essentially the same powertrain that you have today in the C-Max and the Fusion,
Absolutely.
or okay, so same battery and everything.
Same battery, same powertrain.
So the 2-liter GDI,
2-liter Atkinson with the HF35.
Okay. And then in the taxi, I was looking at the taxi earlier. Looks like, is the battery mounted underneath the second row seat?
Yes.
Okay. And then I noticed in the back of the taxi, the floor seems fairly high. Why is that?
We raised the floor up so that they had a level floor because the battery does somewhat into the area.
All right.
And then if you notice at the rear, we've actually provided a cargo storage area. Again, we're looking at taxis around the world.
Sure.
The driver always has his stuff that he's got stuck in the trunk. We want to provide an area for that.
Okay.
And looking at where they can.
So Ford was actually one of the first manufacturers to use hybrid vehicles as taxis. About was it 2006 or 7 when you launched the Escape hybrids in New York?
The Escape hybrid went out, and they've got a long history of being used as taxis. They've been going out there for. We've got fleets that we've talked to that have examples of over 350,000 miles on the original powertrain and battery. So we've got a lot of great experience from that. We've got fleet customers showing interest in it. So this is part of, let's go get some more data and work with some of these customers to understand their usage patterns and what we can do.
So I guess given the experience that you already have with the Escape hybrid, and now you've got this vehicle with the next generation of your hybrid powertrain, what sorts of things do you expect to learn?
What we didn't get, we're going to have telematics on all of these vehicles so that we can gather data about what type of routes, how much time they spend idling, that sort of stuff. So what we've got to date from the old hybrid tax or escape taxis is a lot of, okay, this is the type of improvement we've got, and this is what we saw more anecdotal. Thank you. I'm an engineer. I'm not one of the.
I used to be one too. So.
Yeah, I'm not one of these communication guys. But what we can do with this is we'll be able to find out exactly what kind of speeds, what kind of accelerations, how much idle time. So that
get much more granular data.
Much more granular data, so that we can actually sit with the fleets and say, okay, if you've got this type of a fleet usage, what kind of fuel savings would you get? Because that becomes very important for them if they're going to pay more up front for a vehicle, to know where their trade-off's going to be, how long before they can balance that off. So that's the sort of thing. At the same point, we want to see, what kind of usage the components are going to get, right? What kind of temperatures, what kind of currents are going to go through the batteries, so we can ensure that we've got a system that's designed to be robust and durable for these
Sure, because one of the probably the most important technical change I would think from those escapes to what you have today is those vehicles had nickel metal hydride batteries. Now you've got lithium ion batteries in all of your hybrids.
Yeah,
and so
we've moved several generations in technology in our hybrids, both on the batteries and on the batteries, the engine, and the transmission have all progressed substantially from that. And we want to make sure that we've got the data to know what kind of life we can expect and ensure that we can keep these customers satisfied.
Based on what you've seen so far, from talking to your customers, does there seem to be a lot of interest in this type of powertrain for these kinds of applications?
Yeah, there's a big interest. There's a lot of question whether they want hybrid, whether they want BEV, full electric, or whether they want plug-in.
Right.
And that varies by customer. So we're trying to get some of that usage profile data so that we can help answer those questions together.
And maybe put together a model work with a particular customer, a particular fleet operator. Here's what your usage is. We think this is the combination will be the best fit for you.
Exactly. So as we gather this information, we can start saying, okay, this type of operations drive this type of usage. This is the best technology we can offer you to go through. So we're having a lot of those conversations with all of our commercial customers, and this is part of that step. As you may be aware, we're also doing a similar
with the transit customs. That was actually my next question. Yeah. So with those transit customs, that's a bigger vehicle than the Transit Connect. What powertrain are you using in those vehicles?
We haven't released it, but it is a different powertrain.
Okay.
That one will be a plug-in vehicle. It is a different technology than we have on the road today.
Okay.
And we've been working on how to get that up and running. It will also have 20 vehicles on the road by the end of the year or later this year, so that we can start gathering some similar information in the European city driving areas like London.
Are there any plans to do this with some battery electric vehicles as well to gather that sort of data, or are you going to try and extrapolate from these two programs?
The reality is you can extrapolate a lot from these programs. Once you find out the usage, you can say, okay, what kind of range, what kind of power energy do these fleets need?
Right.
And fleets are very rational. You can go through and look at the data and say, this is how far your products drive every day. Right. Here's the farthest they've ever gone in a year and a half. You don't need to do twice or 3 times the amount of range, and they'll look at the cost of the battery and say, I don't want it. I don't want this.
Looking further out, Ford has announced, 2020, you're going to have an F-150 hybrid as well. The last time a manufacturer introduced a vehicle of that type of configuration. It was not a huge commercial success.
One of the things that we're taking a different tact on our electrification is going after our core attributes and our core products, like the F-150 and the Mustang. And you go take a look at what are the reasons that people buy those products, and it's not fuel economy. So we're going to take on and say, how can we use electrification to enhance the reason people buy them? Capability, performance, productivity. And from that, you then use electrification to enhance that and then also give good fuel economy, as opposed to going out just for fuel economy.
What about low voltage electrification? Do you see that fitting in somewhere in this spectrum as well?
We do have some projects on low voltage electrification. I'm not sure if I announced that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know you haven't announced.
Okay.
I'm asking kind of in general terms. I mean, is that something that you see fitting into the spectrum?
We are looking at the whole spectrum of electrification because we make a whole range of products, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody can afford the big upfront investment of a full hybrid or plug-in or a
Sure.
And as you look across the vehicle lines, there's different uses for different levels of electrification, and that also varies by region as well.
And certainly, at least for the time being, you still have the prospect of the CAFE targets for 2025.
Yeah,
and so it seems like you would need a range of solutions to meet that for different customers.
We're trying to find what the right range of products are. We continue to develop what that is and find where electrification plays a role in meeting those. But again, to try and meet the volumes you would need for that, you don't want to do electrification for fuel economy only.
Right.
You want to do it to deliver what the customer wants in their vehicle, and then also get good fuel economy.
Because certainly in the absence of significantly higher fuel prices, the vehicles that you put on the market have to appeal to customers on their own merits for the reasons that people want to buy that type of vehicle. For a full-size pickup truck, they want payload and towing capability, so they don't want to sacrifice that. If gas is $2, $2.50 a gallon.
And that's exactly our plan. Because as we're going after, we know our brands, especially of our iconic vehicles like the F-150 and the Mustang. We know why people buy them. We're going to take electrification and enhance those reasons to buy, and then in addition provide good fuel.
Right. Okay. I mean that's very along the same lines as what I've heard, also over the last couple of years from a number of premium vehicle brands, where they're putting, for example, plug-in hybrid powertrains into very expensive vehicles and tuning them more for performance, so you get a fuel efficiency boost, but also a performance boost, and that's something that customers are willing to pay the cost premium for.
And in our case, you'd be looking at, you get the performance boost, and then you get the fuel economy.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Anything else that you want to add about what Ford's doing in electrification?
Obviously, we're committed to electrification. We're doing 13 new vehicles between now and 2020. It's going to keep me very busy.
Yeah.
Got a lot of work to do. But it's an exciting time to look at. Like you said, we see a convergence in the cost of ownership between electric and non-electric, or in conventional for the next 15 years. And we're trying to move towards where we see that future with our products.
Yeah, I guess, would it be reasonable to assume that one of the products that Mark Fields announced last month was a next generation police interceptor that's going to be hybrid?
Actually, two pursuit rated police cars. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, utility and a sedan, presumably. Would those presumably be using some similar technology to what's in those transit customs that are going to be running in London? Or is that something else entirely different?
We haven't announced what the technology is.
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the same technology.
Okay.
different customer usage profiles and needs.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Alan Dona.
Thank you, Seth.
So coming off an interview about hybrids and how they are developed and engineered and all of those really interesting, cool inside baseball things, we had a question this week. It was a multi-parter on Twitter, but basically, why are there not too many hybrids that are in the like 250 to 300 horsepower range, where they're sort of like a performance hybrid versus a high efficiency hybrid?
There are some, and they're obviously a little pricier. I think we will see more of them showing up in the next few years, but I mean, right now, they're kind of limited. And I think, part of the reason why there's not more right now is because basically hybrid sales as a whole are not doing great at this point. And the hybrids have been kind of hitting the skids for the last couple of years, with low gas prices. More people that are interested in green transportation have been migrating more towards battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, and away from traditional non-plug-in hybrids. And so the ones that are available, that are more premium hybrids with maybe a little more performance, frankly, haven't been selling very well. One example is the Lexus GS 450, which, let's see, in January, Lexus sold a grand total of 6 of those in the United States. Yeah.
Wow.
And so, none of these, most of these premium performance oriented hybrids haven't really been doing that great in the market.
Well, I mean, you can get an SX. That's a performance hybrid, or a
that's true, and Acura sold 50 of those.
Right. So that's pretty good when your car costs $160,000.
Sure. I think what our listener was looking for there was something a little more moderately priced. You mentioned the MKZ hybrid, and it's I think total combined power output of that one with the engine and the electric motor, I think is about 188 horsepower, which is good, but it's not great. So there are some alternatives to that. One being the BMW 330e, which is actually a plug-in hybrid, and that one, is about 248 horsepower combined with the engine and the motor. There's also the Mercedes-Benz C350e, which is also a plug-in hybrid, in the same segment, similar kind of output. So there are some examples out there, but again, none of these are selling particularly well. The Mercedes, they sold 210 in January. BMW sold 129 330Es. Yeah. So availability is kind of limited, mostly in California, but you can get them in other places. There's just not a lot of demand for them.
Well, and I would expect too the Mercedes and the BMW, if you're going to purchase them, you're going to get less car for more money, than the MKZ, in terms of just size and space and features. You're going to spend more to equip on paper one of the German cars the same way. They probably lease for about the same, maybe a little better on the Germans. Just they like to juice their lease rates low because they have high residuals, so they play around with that.
And they also get around a lot of that too with their certified pre-owned programs. So they sell a lot of their off-lease vehicles through CPO programs, and that makes them a lot of money.
I guess one of the things I would offer up is don't necessarily get so hung up on the horsepower number with a hybrid, because you've got the electric motor there. So
yeah, I mean, that's a key advantage there, because the electric motor's got torque, from 0 RPM.
Right.
In most driving, where you want the low end torque, it actually feels stronger than it is. I mean, unless you're going for max speed runs all the time, which, in which case, why are you buying a hybrid? For the kind of driving you're going to do most of the time, you don't actually need that much power. But if you do, just tonight, I guess the embargo was lifted on drive impressions of the new Porsche Panamera Turbo S E hybrid or whatever they call it.
They got to stop making their names a paragraph, and we'll be able to explain their cars a lot better.
But this one, they've got the plug-in hybrid system that's already available with a V6 engine, and they're pairing it up with a twin turbo 4-liter V8 for a total output of 670 horsepower. So they're using a lot of the technology from the 918 Spider and putting that into the Panamera. So if you really want a high performance hybrid, that's one to take a look at.
How do you think those cars are going to age? Like we've seen, something like the Porsche 928 has certainly not aged well. You can get one of those very inexpensively because it's just a nightmare in terms of or it can be, I should say. Now when you've got a Panamera with a hybrid, and a high performance hybrid powertrain, I'm just wondering, like, in 15 years, is this the new, $7,000 Porsche that's just a complete mess?
It probably won't be that cheap, but
inflation and all, it'll be 14.
Yeah. No, I think it'll do better than 1970s era Porsches, especially the 928. Yeah, and especially this second generation Panamera, it's a much better looking car than the first generation version was. And I think hybrid technology, and I think all of the technology in these vehicles, has advanced to the point where they're much more reliable. One of the issues with cars like the 928 was they were complex, and they had reliability issues in those days, and they ended up being very expensive to fix. Certainly, something like a Panamera plug-in hybrid is not going to be cheap to fix 10 or 15 years from now. But it's also, I'm going to guess, probably less likely to have problems.
I was going to say,
at least some of the kinds of problems that a 928 had.
Well, yeah, it's probably a lot less prone to breaking, but I mean, it's just I do these things. I want to be the agent provocateur. I'll ask questions with
nothing wrong with that. I mean,
open answers.
Somebody needs to ask the questions.
Right. But the hybrids that spring to mind that are kind of the most enthusiastic driving, like overall driving experience. Like I said, don't get hung up necessarily on the just the horsepower number, but go drive them. The Accord hybrid doesn't seem to have a problem feeling enthusiastic. They've matched the V6 with the hybrid powertrain in that. So
that was on the original Accord hybrid. Is it not
the V6 still? I don't know.
No,
that's when I drove.
They only did that. That was only the very original one. The current generation Accord hybrids are 4 cylinders.
Okay, so Dan is full of crap. It's still good to drive though.
Both the Accord and the Fusion and the MKZ, which shares the same powertrain, they actually perform pretty well.
Yeah, I really liked the Fusion Energy. So that's a plug-in, and that was.
Yeah, I mean it's the same powertrain that's in the regular Fusion hybrid, except with a bigger battery.
Yeah, and I liked that a lot. I liked the ability to just be able to select when I was running off the battery and when I was operating as a hybrid and stuff. And that car drives well. The one issue I have with the Fusion is just visibility and stuff like that. It's a little bit more like sitting in a bucket, but it's just generally a good car. But you're already driving an MKZ hybrid, so this. We're not breaking new ground. How does that Camry hybrid that you had stack up in this?
I think it's probably a little less lively than it's definitely a little less lively than the Ford system. It's not quite as powerful, but it's still good. I think Ford has definitely tuned their system for a little more performance than Toyota has. At least in the Fusion versus Camry comparison. If you're looking for more of a performance hybrid from Toyota, then I think probably the Lexus, the GS is probably the one you'd want to look at, or I would take a look at the either the Mercedes C-Class or the 3 Series. In fact, I've got a 3 Series, a 330e scheduled for early April, so I'll let you know firsthand what that one's like.
How does that, the BMW system, is that basically they developed one system and scaled it? Because I'm just thinking I had an X5 that was the hybrid.
As a matter of fact, it is, except the 3 Series weighs a lot less than an X5.
So I was surprised actually by how good the BMW hybrid system is, given how much they scoffed at it for how long.
Oh yeah, I know they've done a good job on it.
So all right, I think we've given some options.
Well, actually, if another good performance hybrid option, if you want one, is the i8, the BMW i8.
Well, that's an awfully expensive option.
It's probably cheaper than that Panamera.
That's true. Hey, if it's somebody else's money too, right? Like, get money bags.
That's right.
Sell the house, buy the car.
That's right. That's what we're here for, to spend somebody else's money.
Correct. It's always fun. All right. What else did we get question wise? I know.
Let's see. Somebody had a comment about what car brand does the marketing write checks that cars can't cash.
Oh, and he said Jeep.
Yeah. I have to disagree with that one. Certainly, not all Jeeps are created equal. There's a lot of the Jeeps that people buy, never go off road and probably shouldn't. But on the other hand, if you actually do want to do some real off-roading, you'd be hard pressed to find something more capable than a Wrangler. Pretty much all the Jeep models, have at least, one trail rated edition. Yeah. And, those, generally have really capable 4-wheel drive systems and, good, suspension systems that are capable of doing some serious off-roading.
They will get you very horribly stuck at the point where you run out of talent, because they are better than you are at off-roading.
Yes.
I'm using the general you at this point, but even the old, the Compass and the Patriot, equipped properly, and not even with the trail rated setup, but just their basic transfer cases and stuff, they would do okay.
They were unpleasant vehicles to drive, but if you wanted to do some off-roading, they were shockingly capable.
Yeah. So marketing is this thing though, you're creating an aspiration with it. So yes, you're showing cars in situations that they never would be in, but if you showed them in everyday situations, you wouldn't necessarily create the proper image and cachet, because it's all just psychology and manipulation. That's why advertising is done. So it depends on how they want to sell it, but they've got to position, Jeep, for example, has to position the Renegade as a true Jeep, because it certainly has picked up all those styling cues. So they're obligated to show it doing those Jeepy things, because that's what people think of when they go putting a Jeep in their driveway. They don't say yes, I know I'm never going to do that. Or maybe they do. They acknowledge it to themselves. Yeah, I know.
But I could if I wanted to.
Right. It's I could if I wanted to, even though you never will. And you probably actually couldn't, like they did in the commercial, because you suck at driving in those places.
Yeah.
So I don't know that Jeep is, I understand where he's coming from. I'm not sure that I completely agree. I feel like you, I think that the vehicles actually have the chops that the drivers don't.
So what is a brand that its cars don't match up to the claims?
Yeah, that is kind of a I guess so. What are the claims? Certainly Lincoln, I can point at their advertising and just go, I don't know what the hell they're trying to sell. So I can't measure the performance of the
quiet
cars.
Quiet luxury.
So yeah, I drive the Lincoln around and I hear Matthew McConaughey whispering in my ear. I don't know. But Lincolns in general, there's nothing exclusive about a Lincoln. They are fancy Fords. They're not even all that fancy. They don't offer anything unique enough. Even the Continental, I'm not fully convinced. So I just feel like overall they're trying to build an image, and they're doing better with getting product there, but they don't have it yet.
Well, let's see if they build a new Navigator with those massive gull wing doors that they had on the concept they showed last year, would that convince you?
You know, I would admire the chutzpah that took. Absolutely. I have a feeling
those doors probably weigh more than a Continental.
Yeah, that's true. That would be worth talking about, wouldn't it? And then you'd see them out there at the mall, just like this, and the whole family of.
But they don't bend in the middle like a Tesla.
Yeah. Well, I'm just picturing, like I see enough of the Navigators with the failed air suspension, those gull wing doors. A few years in, that's going to be great. Yeah, I mean, so Lincoln is one that I'm crapping all over their marketing because I just don't think they're well, I'll say advertising, not marketing. They're different, actually. Acura, I don't know what, again, like I think that's just another bunch of nonsense. So it's less that they're writing checks that the cars can't cash.
I don't know that I've even ever seen that I've seen an Acura ad anytime recently. So I'm not even sure what it is what kind of message they're trying to get across. That said, I don't mind their vehicles.
No, I like their vehicles.
Driving their vehicles.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we're pretty immune to it too. Like that stuff becomes wallpaper for us.
It's true. I mean, I'm a cord cutter, so, I don't see many ads. So it's hard for me to judge.
Yeah. And I live in cord cutting land, and you will be shocked to know that working in advertising makes you want to avoid most forms of advertising as much as possible. And, the worst thing for me is I hate all car ads because they are all just gibberish. They're not good. And we're at this place in our culture where traditional car advertising is just such a turnoff to the actual meat of the car buying market. Even me, I do not want to see a Mustang or a Camaro doing burnouts and just BS. I do not care. That is not how I drive the car. That macho BS swagger.
Speak for yourself.
I don't know. If I do, I'll have a little bit of a giggle, but it's not like, this just reminded me. I think Dodge's campaign overall for their cars and I guess for all their vehicles, I think that's terrible. They focus on being sinister and super badass and evil. And that's just not, I don't like it. I don't, because the cars aren't evil. They're good. There's merit there that they could sell without having to put that, we're so tough kind of image around it. Cause it's very contrived. And I mean, this is funny talking about sort of degrees of contrivance about advertising. So we could do an entire podcast on this. I'm just going to stop.
That's true. And, since we're already running on the long side, we also had one email about in-car voice assistants, but let's save that one for next week.
Okay. So we'll get back to everybody next week for episode 16. This has been episode 15 of Wheelbearings. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks everybody. See you next week.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.